This is August 1970, New Vrindavan. I was a brand new devotee, and Satsvarup Das Adhikari and Uddhava Prabhu drove some of us new guys down from Boston to New Vrindavan for Janmashtami festival, which was the festival in Iskcon at the time. It was pre-India gatherings.
In those days it was standard practice in Iskcon to do nirjal fasting on these big days like Gaur Purnim and Janmashtami and Vaspuja, which means no food and no water. And at midnight on Janmashtami we'd have a little breakfast drink, like a salty lemon drink, and that was it. And then we'd fast all day till noon on Vaspuja. You know, it wasn't considered any kind of fanaticism. That was just the standard. That was just what we did.
This was the first international GBC meeting where all the devotees Prabhupada had chosen to the governing body commission met together for the first time to begin sharing some of the load of management that Prabhupada had carried alone through the entire movement up to that time. There was some controversy going on in the Iskcon at that time. He was testing our abilities to manage the movement.
Subal, Brahmananda, Gargamuni, and Vishnujan were together, and they came to this president's meeting. They weren't presidents, they were new sannyasis. Now, the president's meeting was happening in the temple building on New Vrindavan, and meanwhile, the first GBC meeting was happening at Hayagriva's house, which was on a little hill right next to the temple, but up the hill. Brahmananda and Gargamuni and Subal, Vishnujan didn't have much to do with it, took over the president's meeting and started doing this whole trip on us about how we were gotten way ahead of ourselves. We couldn't even understand who Prabhupada was, what to speak of understanding who Krishna was, and we should understand that our entire relationship was with Prabhupada. And when you read Bhagavad Gita, you shouldn't read Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. You should read Srila Prabhupada Uvacha.
So what do I see when I jump out of the van hours and hours later from Boston is one of our sannyasis holding somebody against a fence and saying, Prabhupada is God, Prabhupada is Krishna, and because we haven't recognized this, he's left us. There I was, brand new, thrilled by Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, joining the Hare Krishna movement, and here 2 months later, I'm attending my first festival, and right before my eyes, I appear to be seeing the entire movement torn asunder by this controversy.
Prabhupada confronted us, myself specifically, with the minimization in Los Angeles before taking sannyas. It was the most shocking experience of my life. Prabhupada's chastisement was so severe. Spiritually, I could feel Prabhupada withdrawing his mercy. And then Prabhupada gave us the sannyas, so I felt, and the others, that we have to compensate for the minimization, and the way to compensate for that was to emphasize. Instead of underemphasizing Srila Prabhupada, we should now overemphasize him.
Our devotees were leaving. They were blooping. You know, there were devotees just crying and walking down that road, down the bottom of the mountain, and just leaving. Now, these are devotees who are totally dedicated to Prabhupada. There's no other reason for them to be in this movement. There was nothing except Prabhupada. So every devotee that you see in this film, they're there because of Prabhupada. They're in the movement because of Prabhupada. No one else, nothing else. And suddenly, these men announce to us that Prabhupada has left and is never coming back. We've offended him. The mood was chaos.
And they also said, unless we could chant purely we shouldn't chant at all. We would be offenders to the holy name. And this was a new idea because Srila Prabhupada had taught us that we become purified by chanting, that there's a clearing stage, and but you do it and you become purified by doing it. And this was devastating news to me personally and to everyone. It's atmosphere of total depressive devastation took over everyone, and everyone was like wailing and weeping and thinking we were all going to have to leave Prabhupada because we couldn't chant purely. It really like cast a spell on everybody.
I remember at the time, I would listen to them. They wouldn't make any sense to me. I was 28 years old in 1970. And I would listen to them. They wouldn't make any sense. But I knew Prabhupada. I hadn't met him, but I knew he had something. So I would go in front of this very primitive altar that they had, and on the lower step they had Prabhupada's picture. And I would sit in front of his picture and I would cry. And I would talk to Prabhupada. I say, Prabhupada, when would these kids grow up? Why don't you come and help? I would never get angry at them. I would feel like they were innocent. They were wonderful, they were sincere, they were genuine, they were beautiful, but they were childish.
Srila Prabhupada had just formed the GBC that summer, and their first act, as far as I'm aware, is to consult Prabhupada about what his new sannyasis are saying. And Prabhupada's response is, I'm paraphrasing, but it's nonsense, it's not true. The spiritual master is not God. The poison here is personal ambition, because if the spiritual master is God, that means you can become God too. So it's Mayavad philosophy. And of course, Prabhupada's books were being consulted by both sides to prove this or that. But Prabhupada responded very strongly, and he expelled them.
To me, that experience it was like the loss of innocence. The Iskcon movement lost its innocence at that point. Because before that, it was all like innocent and simply Prabhupada. And after that, even though the movement continued and it was wonderful, there was this opening for this Maya, this contamination to enter. So finally it got philosophically straightened out, and the sannyasis fled. They just disappeared, I think in the middle of the night. Nobody knew where they went.
Prabhupada was in Japan at the time, and we had to by letters and so on, so it took time, but basically we were arrested and put into a van, and Bhagavan drove the van to Detroit.
Everybody was still upset by the whole thing, and I didn't want him talking to any of the devotees. So now that I recall, I locked them in the attic. And we just sent food up there, and nobody was allowed to talk to him. And then either I got word from Prabhupada or I just decided to send them out to preach, and they ended up going up to Ann Arbor.
We went out into the street. I had a quarter. That's all I had was a quarter. And the four of us went walking down the street. We didn't know where to go. We didn't know what to do. I felt very, very disturbed, to be asked to leave devotees, was the most terrible thing. What could be worse? But at the same time, we were forced to take shelter of Prabhupada and Krishna. We felt, well, this is what sannyas is. You have nothing. And we just walked down the street. We walked as far as we could until it became night. Then we had to sleep somewhere. So along the roadside there were these big fir trees. And fir trees, very thick. So they offered some protection. And the needles make a very soft. So we slept under the fir trees. on the needles. It's interesting, in the morning we woke up and we were right outside the front gates of the Ford Motor Company of Detroit. And then interesting things happened. You know, we had no food, we had no money. We were just starving. And then we sat under a tree and we had kirtan and read to each other what else we were going to do. And as we were doing this the first day, I'm telling you, you're not going to believe this, but a little boy came up and he had with him a loaf of bread and a bottle of milk. Where did this little boy come from? And he said, "Here, my mommy told me to give this to you." And he put the bread down in the milk and then ran away.
This was the first wave of devotees to enter India as a group of Westerners, the World Sankirtan Party from Iskcon. And it was on Prabhupada's personal order and invitation that we were together. It actually became very second nature for us to immediately begin Harinam Sankirtan wherever we were. That was what we were going to India for. It was under the banner of the World Sankirtan Party. So we had we didn't have second thoughts about having immediate kirtans.
I know I was nervous there because, there were guards standing around with rifles, and we were in Muslim land. But we were bold. At that point, we were on our way, and our devotion to Prabhupada was our focus. We had no idea about India, what was in store, but we knew we were being led, and we had our mission.
Most people had their faces askewed, staring and wondering, what are they doing? We even tried to preach to them in English. And as soon as the kirtan party would stop, we would all either chant japa with some ferociousness or go out and preach to whoever was standing and staring at us. There's the famous Brothers Airway plot plane that was really not a fit for human travel. It was the inside of a freight company's plane with absolutely no facility. You could see straight into the cockpit from the main body of the plane. I remember there were these guards with big machine guns, huge guns, pointed at Giriraj as he was walking along. They couldn't put him in a category and weren't sure what he was invocating, but they had his guns on him, and he was completely oblivious, immersed in the holy name.
I took a walk. I just didn't want to watch. And I took a walk around the plane, chanted myself, prayed for protection. And when I came back around the plane, I looked over. The first thing I saw were two machine guns leaning up against the bus, and Giriraj Maharaj holding one guy in each hand. And these Egyptian military guys are jumping up and down chanting Hare Krishna with big grins on their face.
Prabhu Daya